You are listening to Nightmare Road, your podcast for true crime and paranormal events. Proceed with caution, as some of the subjects covered may trigger certain individuals. Now join us as we journey down Nightmare Road.
Oh man, welcome.
Every time.
Every
time.
Every time. Welcome to another episode. Wow, I'm being red. Looks like I've been choked out. Anyways, welcome to another episode of Nightmare Road. I am one of your hosts, Deacon, and I am here with a very, very fabulous
SOS. Here we go.
And today we have a very, very cool episode. What are we talking about today, SOS?
We're talking about skinwalkers, the legends of skinwalkers and everything associated with it. And I kind of find it fascinating, actually. So, it's kind of interesting. So this is really, from what I've seen, and I've done this topic on other podcasts and researched it, and this is only purely a Native American legend. Right? I mean, there are legends that are kind of similar in other countries, but they're not like there's the Selkies of Scotland and Ireland. There's different things out there, but in the Wendigo. You burning up there, Deacon? You okay?
Yeah, I'm okay. I have a bit of a fever. I'm quite ill, but I'm fine.
Anyway, but there's a couple of tribes. I think it was Navajo and Hopi that this legend is based around.
So, if I were to ask you, can you give me the definition of a skinwalker according to Navajo folklore? What would be like the simplest terms? Like if somebody were like, "What's a skinwalker?" You know,
it's a witch. In simplest terms, yeah. It's a witch or a medicine man. So from what I've read is that the medicine men are taught both light and dark magic. Right? They're taught light and dark because you have to know the dark to use the good and to be able to defend with the good. So you have to be taught both paths. But that some of the medicine man, and medicine man isn't always a man. Sometimes they're a woman, but that's the term.
medicine
the healer,
person.
the pronoun thing going on here. But anyway, they have to know the light and the dark, and sometimes they decide to veer to the dark and only stay in that dark path. And so then the skinwalker, then from what I've read, I don't know if it's also just that Hopi have this, but the Navajos definitely do, that the skinwalker, to become a skinwalker, they have to murder a member of their family, preferably a sibling. But women have been seen shape-shifting and are known to be skinwalkers on the Navajo reservation. So it's not just a male thing.
Yes, and what's interesting is that now I'm going to get a little bit off topic here because I always do because there's something wrong with me. So, like for example, in El Salvador or in El Salvador, there's witches, and one of the main things about witches is that they're able to shapeshift. And they will shapeshift into creatures that you can find around. They're not going to turn into a deer. They're not going to turn into, they turn into pigs. They turn into monkeys. And it's really interesting because they have to. One of the stories is they have to sacrifice a family member of theirs to get this dark magic. And then every night they have to go, they have to turn into for example, they turn into a pig and they go into villages and they start tormenting people, and they'll carry off people's children and things like that. And they'll take them back to their hut and sacrifice them. And it's so much so that people in small villages actually have some places, and this is going to be funny to some people, but they have signs on how you can tell if the pig is a person or if the pig is a real pig. And they have like certain like tests that you can do. When a pig comes in, you can leave like wire traps, and if the pig stops and kind of looks at it like it recognizes what it is, it's like that's a witch. You know, if you try to, yeah, like if the pig will stop when you put like a wire trap or something like that, and it's not going to get caught in it, like will stop and like go around. It's like, okay, this is a witch. It knows what this is. But if it just runs right into it, people are like, okay, that's a real pig. So people at night will actually put salt around their homes to keep witches away or to keep magical beings or things like that. And it's huge. So I think I've told you this in the past, but in places like El Salvador, if you tell them that you don't believe in magic and you don't tell them that you don't believe in witches, you don't believe, they'll call you an idiot. They'll be like,
yeah,
this guy doesn't believe in this kind of stuff. What an idiot, you know. So
that's really cool. I like that, but I think we need more of the mystery in our life, right? So I like that. But so the one thing about the Navajo skinwalkers too is that apparently they can control you by, if they look in your eyes, they can then control you. Like you're done for. It's that almost like the voodoo zombie aspect of things, right? So and that they can reanimate the dead, which I found interesting. I found an article online when I was doing some more research on this, and I'm going to give a shout out because this is a really good article, and I found it really fascinating. One of the better articles I've read on this, and it's by a man named Corey Daniel, and he wrote, it's on the phoenixenigma.com under the title of Skinwalker, and he outlines a lot of stories that he was personally told on the Navajo reservation. I don't know if he's Navajo or has any of that bloodline, but apparently he spends a lot of time on the reservation in Arizona. And what I didn't know, and he brings up in this article too, is that, and it's interesting because I just did a podcast on the Wendigo or the Wendigo, however you want to say it. There's like 30 different pronunciations for it.
yeah.
On my other podcast, we just did this topic, and I did not know that the Navajo were originally from Alberta, Canada. Well, that's kind of the area that legend comes from. So are the two legends actually the same and just got renamed? Because they're very similar. They're very similar. And then the Navajo came down to Arizona, the Four Corners area. So I guess at one point they made that transition down probably for climate reasons and hunting, right? Although I'm not sure the hunting is that great in the Four Corners, but it's probably better in the winter than in Canada.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Although the Wendigo came out of what, like Michigan, Minnesota, that kind of that area. But yeah.
And a Wendigo, when a guy eats a family member because he's hungry and he's desperate, and then he's cursed to be a Wendigo, which is a creature that varies in size, but the more he eats, the more hungry he gets, and like the more, and that's such a dark story. And there's actually it's prone with Navajo people where they develop, not all of them obviously, but they develop what's called Wendigo psychosis, where they believe that they're a Wendigo and they will actually become cannibals or dig up graves, and then in their brains they're these horrific creatures.
Yep.
They can look at their hands and they see giant claws, but it's just part of the psychosis. And
well, fascinating that you bring that up, because in this article that I read of Mr. Daniels, it was such a well-written article. Like, I really need to tout it, because so much of the stuff that you read on the paranormal is just somebody grabbing the same legend and just regurgitating it over and over and over and over. So you can find 50 sites in the same article almost word for word. This guy really did a nice job. But he actually interviewed, I believe, a psychologist on the Navajo reservation who said that 50% of the clients that they deal with believe in the Skinwalker. That's huge.
Yeah.
That's huge. And they believe and they attribute problems in life and in family and to the Skinwalker on the reservation. And some of the interviews he had, apparently, if this thing gets near sheep, they die immediately, because sheep they're not a robust creature. I used to raise sheep.
Yeah.
They're not. They, I think goats are a little hardier. They're not a
Sheep
robust.
are stupid.
I just love them. I love sheep. I had we had a lot of sheep growing up, but they're bottom of the food chain there. So
Yeah, they're like young turkeys. A young turkey, if you look at it wrong when it's little, it just dies.
Yeah. So I had never heard that before. I've heard of some of the other things. I didn't know that it would reanimate. I did not know that there are certain skins that the Navajos would not wear. So a lot of the ceremonial customs after a hunt would be that they would then wear the pelt of, right? However, they wouldn't wear the pelt of a predator who could kill them.
Yeah.
Apparently. And so things like, which I didn't know, I guess I never made that connection in my mind. I always thought they had like a bear skin on or a wolf skin, but because the Skinwalkers associated more with those animals, that they would kind of steer clear from putting that on.
It was taboo. If you had a pelt of something like a wolf, people would, not only it's frowned upon, but people would become very suspicious of you. And that's some people think that this is funny and everything, but in those kind of situations, like let's say you do have like I bought this coyote skin online, you have it in your house, and let's say that a coyote gets into one of your neighbors, yards, and then you become a suspect. People are beginning to think like, this guy, I think, killed my livestock, and they'll try to hunt you down. Because they do believe, and I believe in skinwalkers. I'm very skeptical of a lot of things. I wonder if it's just my cultural background, but I believe in things like skinwalkers. I even have a skinwalker killing blade.
You've showed that to me, yeah. That's crazy. I tend to believe, I don't believe as much in Bigfoot from the cryptid side of things, because I think we would have found evidence of it if it was a cryptid animal. If it was an animal, because North America, let's face it, I mean, it's not South or Central America where the jungles are so dense that we are finding different species all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, every few years they find a species like, we didn't know that existed, like the deer with the gills up here.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's so densely forested, they never ran into this animal before. Here, little different. Alpine, subalpine, where Bigfoot allegedly lives, they're not as dense. Now, there are like the rainforest areas like Washington, coastal Washington and all that, where it's pretty dense, but I don't know. Anyway, but
somebody would have seen a Bigfoot.
Huh?
Or at least somebody would have seen a Bigfoot, or at least photographed or gotten like a clear picture. You ever thought that maybe Bigfoot
or at least gotten somebody would have killed one by now. That's what I'm saying. Well, it would have been on the back of somebody's truck coming into town.
What if Bigfoot's already blurry? Like, you look at Bigfoot and it's like, he's blurry. Like, no matter how, I thought it was just a shitty picture. Turns out he's blurry.
Right. That is a good picture. Yeah, that's an interesting
low definition
from the aspect of maybe Bigfoot being a supernatural. I'm more believing that, because that could be the reason why it's so elusive, right? Because it's not a critter. It's not a dog. Like, it's different. It's supernatural. I more believe in that, but because I'm weird. So the Skinwalker thing, if you go down to the Ute reservation, right? Because the Skinwalker Ranch, right?
Yeah.
The Utes had enslaved the Navajos at one time, and so the Navajos cursed the Utes with the curse of the Skinwalker. And so we went down there. Tim and I on my team, and we went down for, I guess it was like 5 days or so. And if you go to the Dinosaur National Monument and you do any kind of hiking back in there, you will see pictographs and petroglyphs everywhere. And from the tribes that were there eons ago. And it's really fascinating because they have animals that you're like, well, what is that? It's a wolf and a man, you'll see things down there. And in these carvings that are just ancient, and well, what were they seeing?
Yeah, and that's a really excellent point. I mean, it's part of the it's part of their lifestyle. Like people that go down to, I almost said down to Decon Ranch. People that go down to Skinwalker Ranch, and then they report something to the people there, like, I just saw the weird, and everybody's like, yeah, of course you saw it. That's just what happens. Did you pick up the hitchhiker? And they go, "Oh, well, yeah, like, hey, Lenny, look, he picked up the hitchhiker," and they start laughing, because you picked up an entity that everybody knows is there, and it's just part of their life. So, and that's what I appreciate about that kind of the acceptance. And then it's kind of, I think that we now live in a culture where we're trying so hard to get away from that kind of stuff that you're almost embarrassed to say that you believe or that you saw.
Yeah.
So I believe that there's a lot more sightings of things that we can't explain, but people are too embarrassed because I'll make fun of them.
So about 2 weeks ago, oh gosh, when was it? Was it a couple of weeks ago? They had the Montana Con, like a paranormal conference up in Montana. And I don't know if you guys follow, or you follow David Pilates. He's the Missing 411. He does all of that.
Yeah.
Yes, he's really a fascinating guy, and he does a lot of research, and I have a ton of respect for that man. But so I was watching one of his episodes prior to us recording tonight, and up there during this, he showed it on his episode and I guess everybody who was at this, there's a vortex up there, and apparently it's really well known. And as everybody was standing there at the vortex, 14 lights came over the top of them, like stationary lights in a weird V formation that trailed way off and then stopped.
Yeah.
And everybody got it on their cell phone. It's not like it was this weird blurry thing. I mean, they stood there for minutes and filmed this. And so I thought that was really fascinating that you have these spots. And the Four Corners region has always been kind of an interesting region, which is where the Navajo reservation is.
Yeah.
So what is it? Arizona, Utah, Colorado, Nevada, right? No?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, the Four Corners region has always been kind of an interesting spot. There's been a lot of cattle mutilations there. There's been mysterious animal deaths there. There's been a lot of missing people in those areas. And for unknown reasons, like they'll get out. There's one young man that went missing. They stopped at a rest stop at the Four Corners region down there, and it's a well-known, it's a bathroom stop. It's like a rock building down there, and they went in and they were standing there. They like him and his dad, or him and his uncle, or something like that, and he was just sitting there. His uncle goes into the restroom, comes back out, guy's gone. Like, guy is gone. He's in a young adult, but he's gone. He is gone. They had never found him. They never found hide nor hair of him. No vehicles came and went. They've looked at traffic cameras. They've looked at cameras on the building. He just vanished. There's a lot of weird things that goes on Earth. There's lots.
Yeah. And what's interesting, you said earlier, vortex, things like where things come through. And going back to Skinwalker Ranch, there was this guy that has a website. I think it's called Hero Paranormal or something. And he does the documenting and all that kind of stuff. And he says that one time he was down at Skinwalker Ranch, and these lights, he says the size of softballs, were just like hovering slowly towards him. And sorry guys, I keep getting cold and then I get hot like an old lady. Anyways, so, so, and so he was seeing these lights and they were slowly walking towards him. And he starts freaking out. And then he's asking one of the guys that is from there. And he's like, what is that? And he says, you're fine. They're hunting. And it's like, are they hunting? No, they're not hunting you. He says, they're just hunting. That's all he said. He says, they'll pass by. And these orbs just kind of went, these balls of light. He says, you can literally see balls of light. He says, they weren't like, and he says they just went over them, and then just kept going out to the field, and they just spread out. And that's what the guy said. They're hunting. I don't know what they're hunting, but he says that's what they are. He says sometimes they'll follow you until you get to the end of the road, like out of that region. He says sometimes those orbs will very slowly follow you, and it doesn't matter how fast you go down that road, before you exit, they're still behind you. It looks like they're moving slow, but they stay, and then they just turn around. They just keep going. So a lot of interesting things from Skinwalker Ranch, just things like that. And back to Skinwalkers. They believe that Skinwalkers might be just something that's from a different dimension. I don't believe that. I believe that it is a bad shaman that has been cursed, and they torment people and they kill your cattle. And but one thing that I can't figure out, at least in places like El Salvador, at least when I hear about a witch turning into an animal, I know their objective. They're there to steal your stuff. They're there to steal your children. But in the Navajo folklore, I can't figure out like why they do the things they do.
No, there doesn't seem any rhyme or reason to it either, other than to instill fear and power and take power. I mean, I don't. Other than just to be, they just are. I mean, I don't know. Skinwalker Ranch is an interesting area. That the lights that you described, we had kind of some similar things happen to us when we were down there. We had some pretty freaky things happen to us while we were down there, and things that we cannot describe. We still don't. Tim and I have talked about it over and over again, and we can't figure it out. And we've had occurrences of things that have happened to us since being home. And the same thing that happened to both of us within a couple of weeks. And he didn't know, I didn't know what happened to him. He didn't know what happened to me until finally one night I made a post and I told him what happened. He goes, oh, so it happened to you, huh? It happened to me 2 weeks ago. So it's really odd. We've just had a variety of things. We saw orbs, we saw UAPs, we saw a mountain glow and people come off the mountain that weren't there. They were like green and blue glowing lights. And Tim, I have never seen Tim scared until we got to Skinwalker area. I mean, he's a big guy. He's like 6'5". He's a big guy. And when you go on a paranormal investigation with him, he's the calm influence in the room. He's a very calming guy. He's quiet. He's calm.
He's also very nice and friendly.
Huh?
I said he's also very nice and friendly.
He's a very nice guy. Yeah. I've never seen him rattled like he was rattled down there. And it's just one of those areas. I didn't know when I came home and I was telling my boss about some of our experiences. He told me that somebody in my office had lived down there for about 20 years. And he goes, well, go talk to so-and-so, and see what he has to say. And then when I talked to him, I asked him, so do you have experiences? And he goes, it was more like when you didn't have an experience. That was the anomaly down there.
Wow, that's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
In places like in Utah, like places like Promontory, and they have ghost towns. You'll see houses that have been abandoned. And it's kind of like what is the name of that family that lived on Skinwalker Ranch before it was bought? And
Shermans.
The Shermans. How they had
Mm-hmm.
their cows completely mutilated. They saw a wolf and then they were shooting at it, and it seems like the bullets bounced off it. and
Well, not only mutilated, one of the stories down there is really interesting with the cattle that I just can't wrap my head around this. So there's a building down there and you can see it from the mesa, and we went up on the mesa at the ranch and you can see this little building and it's really narrow. It was like a I don't even know how to describe it, like a well house, a really narrow,
yeah.
right? So it was really narrow. So it's not like you get to get a cow in it and turn it around like a heifer or something. I mean, it's a little tiny building, but it was kind of tall. And they were missing some cows. And by chance, one of the Shermans opened that door and there was 3 cows stacked. Stacked. How did that happen? How do you do that? And that was the same night that the incident with the dog, all kinds of stuff went on. And they found, and I thought that was really interesting, that the sheriff of the county, when the Shermans were there, confirmed that story. He said, yes, it was true. I was there. Because the sheriff kept getting called out there because nobody knew what was going on.
Yeah, people were freaking out. And they also find cows up on trees, like mutilated cattle up on the trees. And then you get the skeptics that come in and they say things like, well, a strong gust of wind. And it's like, okay, now you just sound stupid.
Come on. Yeah, a tornado that just picked up a cow. The one interesting thing about the cattle mutilations are that they are cut with precision, like a laser. There's no blood at the scene. And usually, like, their organs are removed, their eyes are removed, or their tongues removed, but there's no blood. And there's no animal predation after that, after the death. And, coyotes and animals that are carnivores, they're going to take whatever they can find.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't a cow that's dead, why wouldn't they be ravaging the carcass?
Not just that, but condors, the buzzards flying around. I mean,
right?
Yeah, like that's all they do all day. No matter where you go, those places, you always see vultures flying through the air. Like if there was a debt, like why are they leaving this? I found it to be interesting. They'll sit there for days. Nothing will touch them. Not even insects.
Coming home from Skinwalker, I was flipping through the internet when we finally got around Park City. You can finally get some cell service. It's pretty far in between to get cell service out in those areas. And there was a cattle mutilation that had happened in right off the Ute Reservation the weekend we were there. So by a rancher found the same kind of cattle mutilation that had happened, in this Four Corner region for years, like decades. That was going on, and everybody kept going, that's not really happening. It was happening. It was happening because ranchers, you don't want to lose any livestock. You just don't. That's a lot of money.
Oh,
and
yeah.
To not have tire tracks and not have drag marks and not have blood and not have footprints. I mean, these people, this is what they do. They know animals. They know their livestock and they know their predators.
Yeah. And that's one of the first things that you learn when you operate with a livestock is you begin to notice what kind of predators are around you. So how you can protect your cattle. You know what a wolf track looks like. You know what, and for you to, it's just so crazy to think. What I was saying earlier about, the Shermans, they left. They abandoned everything. They ran off. But in those areas, I have found when I used to live in Utah and I used to go rabbit hunting, you would find these houses that you can go in and everything's there. It's just abandoned. You would find basically where it looks like somebody drove a vehicle through a fence, and because the fence is down, and then there was just like an old rusted truck that was there. It's almost like the family just piled in. I might still have pictures of like there's
like
beds,
in the dead of the night and just fled.
Yeah, just drove off. So you find beds with like rotten bedding there because it's been so long. You find stoves, you find furniture, you find all kinds of things in there, And then you find like abandoned vehicles where the tires have rotted because it was years ago that people left. And then you're like, okay, that's weird. And then you keep going, you keep exploring, you keep driving, and then you get to another place. And you're in another place and you see a house the same way. Like furniture still in there, stoves. They have a stove back then. I mean, they were super valuable. You know, those classic stoves that were,
Oh yeah,
yeah, just left
yeah.
there. Just left. Frying
The
pans
only
left, and
place
then
that
you're
I
like, it's near Promontory. So like, if you guys run that region, you guys can go to
promontory.
Promontory, and you guys can find these houses that have just been left with all kinds of things. Like you can still find like toys, old toys, just left on the ground, like somebody packed up and then just left. And it's like, what would cause somebody to just leave?
So one house you can say, okay, maybe somebody got sick and they left in a hurry and they died at a
Never
hospital,
came back.
whatever. But a series of houses, the only place that I've seen that is Bodie, the old ghost town of Bodie. Everything was left intact and everybody left. There's books in the schoolhouse. There's food in the general store. There's food. They left. They just left like that. Mass exodus of a town. And so Bodie's been incredibly meticulously restored and maintained with all of that there. So I don't know. I can't. That doesn't seem rational to me. Like I can understand one home, not.
Not multiple homes, and that's from what I explored. So I had a friend who was and I'm gonna say it, who was an Indian. His name was Nelson, and he was an older guy. And I was like, dude, look at these houses, isn't this crazy? And he says, yeah, the land is cursed. And I'm like, yeah, you're just drunk, you know. But that's what he said. The land is cursed, you know. And I never took that like into consideration. I'm like, well, in my brain, I thought like what it doesn't matter how bad the crops are, why would you just leave in the middle of the night? But my brain wasn't processing like there's something here that made people leave, you know, because I was until many years later understanding like what he meant by the ground is cursed. I'm like, okay, this makes sense what he meant. At the time I was like, that's a stupid explanation. So what, you can't, I thought that they couldn't grow crops or whatever the issue. I'm like, why would that cause people to leave? Until many years later that I kind of figured, I'm like, okay, something was there that scared these families away. You know, because why would you just
You
leave?
got to wonder. Yeah, you got to wonder what can do that, because the people that lived in those places back in those times, they were a tougher breed of people than we are. You know what I'm
Oh
saying?
yeah.
There's not a lot that would scare those people away from their homesteads because they went
Yeah,
through a
and
lot to get them.
yep, that's what I was gonna say. Is these people had to work their entire lives to get a small piece of land that they can, you know, call their own. And the times were tough. I mean, if you weren't prepared in the wintertime, you die. You know, and these
Yeah, yeah.
and hard people, and we're I wish we had more hard people like that. But back to the Skinwalker thing. Have you seen those videos on YouTube where people are exploring at night and now people are using the term skinwalker. When these videos first started emerging, people were saying that they were like, you know, demonic entities out in the field. There's a famous video where these guys are they can hear somebody yell, "Help me!" You know, and help, and then they're like, "All right, what's going on?" And then they're flashing the flash. Well, first they're trying to find the source of the sound. You know, trying to find the source of the sound, and they're like going through, and they find just some guy, and he's not wearing a shirt. He's just standing there, and the sound is coming from that direction. And all they hear is like, "Help me, please!" And it looks like his mouth isn't moving. He's just standing there. So the guys are like getting close, and the guy's like, "Yeah, this doesn't feel right. Let's just get the hell out of here." And the guy's like, "Are you kidding?" They're like arguing with each other, and then finally he's like, "All right, fine," and they just leave. And then later somebody named that video the Skinwalker video, you know. But isn't that part of the Skinwalker legend in like Navajo that they lure people in, but they can like imitate not just family members, but they're able to like imitate the voices of children, just to lure people in? Or is that
I
a
heard.
Wendigo thing?
I did. Yeah, I think it's the Wendigo, because I was going to say I've read that on the Wendigo, but I didn't read it on the Skinwalker. But something makes me think that a lot of this is commingled. That if the Navajos actually came out of Alberta, and that area is kind of where the Wendigo legend started, was Alberta through the a little bit to the east, right? So then, and as they made their way down, I'm wondering if those legends just kind of morphed and split into two. You know, all of these legends, people say it's just a story, but you got to wonder with legends. I mean, where's everything starts with like the kernel of truth somewhere. So where did this start from? I There's got to be a portion of this that is true, and certainly the Navajos. A lot of the Navajos, probably a majority of the Navajos, if you talk to them, they absolutely believe this. They believe it. They believe there's areas that you shouldn't go. That on their reservation they won't go. There are certain mesas and bluffs that's a no-go zone for them because they believe there are skinwalkers up there. They're frightened of it. There's a filmmaker. He's a YouTuber, and he makes a lot of different films from Appalachia through the reservations. And I really like his work. Can't think of his name right now, but he's great. I'll come up with it next time, I promise. But he was down on the Navajo reservation, and there was places he was with some Navajo guys, and he wanted to go to a certain area, and they said, "No, we don't go up there."
Yeah, they don't go, and that's what I appreciate that kind of stuff is because they believe and they truly believe it, and I believe it. Like I believe in skinwalkers and all that kind of stuff. It's kind of like when I was saying in the beginning of this episode how you had a guy who was I think he was doing a documentary, and he said he was going home and he picked somebody up and he saw somebody walking on the side of the road. He said he looked like an older guy, like a blanket over his head. It was cold, so he's like, "Hey, let me just pick you up." He says, "Where are you going?" The guy didn't answer. He's just like, "Just get in." So he got in, and he says that then he blacked out. He doesn't remember anything, and then his car was just a couple feet down where he picked him up, and he says he was like hanging off the side of the car, and he was by himself, and he was all messed up. He said he had thrown up everywhere, and when he went to tell the guys what had happened the next day, and then they're like, "So what happened?" He says, "Yeah, he said they're like, you picked up the hitchhiker," and then he's like, "Oh yeah," and he says, and then they're like, "Hey, he picked up the hitchhiker," and then a couple people started laughing, and other people was like, "Yeah, you don't pick up. That's a bad spirit. You don't pick him up." And then so apparently this entity will walk down the road, and everybody knows to avoid him, and they just go around them and they just keep driving. And it says because if you do pick him up, this entity will actually drain some of your life force, and that's what he uses to, I guess, sustain himself or something. But everybody knows who he is. They call him the hitchhiker, and everybody knows about him. So the moment he started telling the story, some people started laughing and are like, "Yeah, he picked up the hitchhiker," So we should do an episode on
That's
this.
interesting. Yeah, we should.
We should do an episode on hitchhikers.
Well, it's kind of interesting that it's called the Hitchhiker because if you've been to Skinwalker Ranch, and then you have experiences when you go home, they call it the Hitchhiker Effect. And I was speaking with Caleb, who is the ranch security down there. He grew up in this area, so I was speaking with him, and it was last December, and he's a really nice guy, and he was talking about this. I told him some of what was going on with Tim and I since being down there, and he said, "Oh yeah, that's very common. We call it the hitchhiker effect. Everybody who's been to the ranch has taken a part of that home with them." And so they've all had experiences because they don't all live at the ranch full time, and so they have homes various places. And he says, "Oh, absolutely." And he didn't believe in it. This is a guy he's a Marine and he went through Afghanistan and Iraq, and he didn't believe in any of this stuff until he got there and things started happening to him. So
Hitchhiker effect. I'm not going to talk too much about this guy, but yeah, I have an acquaintance that had experienced some things, and it almost ruined his life, And like I said, I'm not going to get into too much details about it, but he had been in that area, Skinwalker Ranch, and and then he was just, telling me that he was losing his mind, and he said that the experiences that followed him almost ruined his life. So that's all I'm gonna say.
No, I totally understand. I have a person that I've dealt with on the paranormal aspect who was in the oil field industry down there, and he grew up basically right next door to Skinwalker Ranch. And so he spent most of his life down there. And when he moved up here, he started having incredible experiences. And when he first started telling me this stuff, I'm like, whoo, okay. But when you meet somebody and you're looking at them across a table, having a cup of coffee with them, you can get a pretty good sense for a BS story or somebody who's legitimately having experiences and who's truthful and honest. And this man is articulate, he's intelligent, he's educated. There's nothing about him that rings untrue to me. And his experiences are incredible. And as he's telling me this, I was thinking about what Caleb was telling me, and I went, oh my gosh. And he said the same term. He goes, yeah. He goes, it's called the hitchhiker effect. Did you know that? And I went, yeah, I do now. Yeah. So, and he grew up down there. So.
And it's a shame that these people get ridiculed when they tell their experiences, because there's so many stories out there that do get lost because people are so afraid to tell them. Because people's reactions. I mean, like, just hear somebody out. Like, if somebody has we got to wrap up the show, but if somebody has a fantastic story they want to tell you, instead of you saying like, oh yeah, just be like the Art Bell and be like, tell me more.
Tell me more. Yeah.
Yeah, tell me more.
Well, because you never know. I mean, just because you didn't experience it, people say that all the time. Well, I don't believe in the paranormal. Well, just because you don't doesn't mean it's not happening. And our most ardent believers are usually the skeptics that asked us to come in the house because, oh, my wife says this is going on. I don't believe it. I never saw it. But all of a sudden we go in there and things start happening. Then they're like, oh my God, this is real. And they become the most hardcore believers after that.
Yeah. And they're ashamed to admit it because of their colleagues, and it just sucks. Because you do get, I believe that the hardest skeptics out there are the ones that are the most afraid of the paranormal, so they convince themselves that it's all ridiculous. Be quiet, Colleen. Don't say. I mean,
I'm
SOS.
not saying a word, Decon. If you've listened to previous videos, you know what I was going to say.
Anyways. All right, guys, let's wrap this up. This Skinwalker topic is just so big, and there's so much that we can just go for hours because there's so much. I mean, you guys can, if you want to plug that guy that you were just talking about some of his research.
Yeah, so his name is Corey Daniel, and he wrote an article December 17, 2015, called Skinwalkers, and it's on thephoenixenigma.com. And I'm a really excellent article. So shout out to him. He's a great researcher and writer.
Yeah, and also if you guys want to find out more on witches that shapeshift in places like El Salvador, you guys can look up Brujas del Salvador or La Bruja Pancha, and you guys can research her, and she's amazing. There's still a bounty on her head, by the way, from the government. Oh. She has her own cave. It's crazy. I might collect one day.
There you go.
So, anyways, this was a great show, and also I'm beginning to think that I'm going to start calling the fans of this show the Cult of the Sick, because you people are sick. I cannot believe you listen to this instead of doing something productive with your lives. So
we do appreciate it. So please subscribe and tell your friends. Our audience is growing by leaps and bounds, and we do appreciate every one of you.
Yeah, you guys are amazing. You bunch of sick people, you. Cult of the Sick. So, anyways, I was one of your hosts, Decon, and here was the very, very magnificent
SOS.
And remember, guys, to always look, always look both ways, especially if you find yourselves on nightmare